What was the number one Tanium Tech Talk in 2022? It was Tanium Provision. Far and away, you all watched that video more than any other episode we put out last year. So we're going to double down on that today and show you the production release and the latest and greatest features in bare metal imaging from Tanium to Windows and Linux. Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone, and boy, have we got a show in store for you today. But you know what? It's kind of in the new year, but you're thinking, wait a minute, February? Aren't New Year's resolutions all supposed to be done by now and forgotten? But you know what? There's some great things you could put on your New Year's resolutions list. It's not too late to get started. I mean, think about it. You could get Tanium certified. Wouldn't that be a great New Year's resolution? So get some extra knowledge in the noggin when you get into the Tanium console, right? And show them what you know. So get out there to tanium.com/certifications. That's one great place that you could spend some time for your New Year's resolution. You might notice in a different category, I look a little different than I did a year ago. I've actually dropped 40 pounds working on last year's resolution, and I was a late starter. I didn't start till the end of March last year, and here I am about, 9-10 months, and I have lost 40 pounds. I eat my veggies, and I have these rubber bands that are strong, and I stretch them, working out a little bit. And I'd love to talk to you about it on social media. Just ping me, and I'd love to talk about how you can work from home and still get fit. So speaking of fit, we've got a fit guest on our show today as well. So we're going to talk about Tanium Provision. Now, Tanium Provision is the ability from Tanium to do bare metal imaging on Windows and Linux machines. And I know that sounds like science fiction. That's what I said when I came to Tanium. I thought, this can't be true. This looks like science fiction, but it's not. This is the real deal. So before I talk too long here, I want to get to our guest. Mike, go ahead and introduce yourself for those who didn't see the last show.
My name is Mike Niehaus. I've been at Tanium for just over 2 years now, working on a variety of device management type areas. The first big project that I worked on was Tanium Provision, creating a bare metal deployment solution basically from scratch on top of the existing Tanium platform, providing those capabilities that customers have been asking for a while.
Like I just said in the intro teaser, Mike, your show was #1 last year, like twice as many views as any of the other episodes. So congratulations for that. We really found a popular topic with our audience here. So we want to double down on it. Now, as I recall, last year when you were about this time, you were showing us Provision, but it wasn't actually production released yet. Could you kind of give us the overview of what is Provision maybe and catch us up on what's changed since then?
Provision is a solution for bare metal deployment. We initially added support for deploying Windows 10, Windows 11 images for BIOS and UEFI machines. And when we were building it out, we had actually it was kind of in the early days of COVID, and there was a desire to do work from home and scenarios like that. So we actually had some unique requirements initially to do more around how do we image over the internet? How do we do this from USB keys and from other not on the corporate network locations? So that drove us down a path of leveraging some unique components, including using a Linux-based mechanism for initiating the bare metal deployment. And kind of a natural follow-on to that was we also said, well, there's no reason we can't deploy Linux images as well. So we've added support for all the most common Linux distributions as well to be able to do bare metal deployment to laptops, desktops, servers, any type of device like that.
Man, that's fantastic. So not only are we doing Windows, we're doing Windows and Linux, doing it Tanium style, right? That's amazing. So tell me, I know, normally when I think of imaging a Windows box, I think of some unique scenarios, what I would think would be challenging, like offline domain join, PowerShell scripts to customize. I know we've built in some of those things. I'd like to talk about those as well. But then I know you've also got up your sleeve some really clever use cases that we devised. So tell us about some of the, what's the, the top 3, 4, 5 things that people are going to, out of the box, these are your go-to features in Provision.
Obviously, there are plenty of additional OS deployment solutions out in the real world. And we could look at those and say, well, what did they do well and what could they use improvements on? And one of the areas was just generally simplicity. How can we make this as simple as possible, easy to set up, easy to deploy, easy to use? One of the others was just security. Obviously, Tanium puts a lot of emphasis on creating secure solutions. So offline domain join was one of those ways that we could make a solution that's more secure, that we're not passing user IDs and passwords around your network. Instead, we can have our provisioned solution reach out to a service that does an offline domain join on behalf of the client, not too unsimilar to what would be done in a Windows Autopilot scenario. It uses the same type of technology. So we can have that service create a computer account in Active Directory for the machine, send back a blob to the device that says, here's what you need to get joined to Active Directory. And that finishes out the process securely. So it's those sorts of things that we've been trying to add into the process to make it easy and secure at the same time.
Wow, that's IT. We often deal with very complex tasks, and certainly imaging work from home devices, especially. I mean, these are really complicated scenarios. And I'm thinking, I know PXE, right? PXE, pre-boot execution environment, right? Those PXE endpoints. I can only imagine. Now, I know enough of this to be dangerous, but I've heard from a lot of my peers who are doing a lot of POCs with this right now that you don't have to have a PXE server anymore, but it actually takes a Tanium client and turns it into a PXE server. Can you tell us how that works?
Yeah, we basically built out our own PXE service that can run on Windows Server, Windows Client, so Windows 10, Windows 11, Mac OS, Linux. We don't care. It'll run anywhere. And it's basically written in a portable language that enables us to run it on any operating system supported by that environment. So we can run it wherever you want to run it. So if you've got a laptop in a location that is always on, maybe it sits at the secretary's desk or the receptionist's desk and is just always there, that could be your PXE server. So you have flexibility to decide at each location where you would want this to run on any operating system that we support.
Again, the simplicity of that is just amazing. That you don't have to stand up additional infrastructure for that. Now, I know several of our viewers are familiar with PowerShell. I used to do a thing or two with PowerShell, and I've heard some of my peers talking about how there's some custom scripts involved now. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
We have a basic end-to-end process that we provide out of the box in Provision that does all of the heavy lifting of using the ADK tools from Microsoft and Windows PE and image applying and driver injection and all that fun stuff. But we know that customers have different needs to customize the process. Rather than doing something more complex like a kind of an old task sequence approach where you have a whole bunch of steps and you can insert your own in the middle, we just added points in the process where you can drop in your own custom script and we'll call it automatically. So we can do that in Windows PE before and after an image has been applied. We can do it in the full OS before or after we have really joined the device to Active Directory via ODJ and before we've done any customization or after we've got the Tanium client installed and all the other customizations already made to the OS. So it gives you the flexibility to tweak the process to add in your own stuff. Most of our scripts are written in PowerShell, so we just call your scripts, which would also be written in PowerShell, so that it just becomes a smooth process through the whole flow.
That's a beautiful thing. And so, like I mentioned earlier, when we did the show last year, we were still on a pre-release. Could you go ahead and take us into the UI and show us what the new console looks like? Kind of give us a tour.
Sure. We'll start out in the provision console. So we're already in the provision module. From here, we can kind of take a quick tour. So let's start out with the basics. We can go into the settings for the environment where we can do things like turn on verbose logging and configure ports and that kind of stuff. We can also configure some global settings, so we can specify how the bundles of the operating system bundles should be displayed. Should they be sorted by ID or description or name? How long should we wait before choosing a default item? How long should we wait before choosing a default network? So we've got some customization information that we can put in here. One of the things we added in our most recent release was the ability to specify a confirmation code. We've had requests from customers who've said, well, we have end users who accidentally PXE boot their machines. Maybe they press the magic blue button on a Lenovo device, or they hit the F12 key on other devices as they're starting up, and they PXE boot the machine and accidentally re-image their device. So they asked for a confirmation code that the IT person would know and can type in to complete the bare metal imaging process, but the end user wouldn't know. So we'll take a look at that as we get farther into this, what that actually looks like. We can choose a default bundle, how long before that bundle would automatically be selected. So if you PXE booted a machine and didn't make a selection yourself, after 5 minutes, it would automatically choose that bundle for you. So that enables you to do remote deployments where you initiate this and just kind of let it take off by itself. We can leverage Azure storage and Azure AD authentication if you've got home users that want to download the content from the internet. So just some basic settings for customizing there. We also added the ability to do branding. So you can put in your own message. Like in this case, I just put in some garbage text. You can put in your own logo. Like I put in a Contoso logo that will get displayed during the process, just to give the end users a confirmation that this is really something that's been provided by the organization. So we can do those configuration settings. The next step typically then would be to create a provision endpoint, which is a server that can provide multiple roles. It first needs to provide the pre-boot execution environment. So it needs to be able to service PXE requests coming from clients to network boot. It also can process offline domain join requests, and it caches all the content that's being downloaded for a particular operating system bundle that's being deployed. We can select by provision endpoint which bundle should be available. You can see I've got quite a few of them covering all the different scenarios and OSs that we support. So you might have one PXE endpoint that only needs one or two of these, so you could do that, and then another PXE endpoint that needs all of them. So you get the flexibility to configure that. Once that's been enabled and deployed, you then can PXE boot a machine to start the process to do the deployment. You need something to deploy though, so you would need to create an OS bundle. In this case, I've got a bunch of existing OS bundles that deploy Windows 10, Windows 11, 21H2, 22H2, all the different Linux variations that we support, including the latest RedHat releases. So all of these are currently available. Just to show you what that process looks like, let me walk through the process of creating a bundle from scratch. So let me create an OS bundle. I'll call this one Windows 11 Demo. It is Windows. It's going to be a workstation OS. It's going to run x64. I have an image index of 1 for my existing WIM file, which I can browse to. There's my image file. I need to specify the 80K files, which include Windows PE and all the different imaging and data migration tools from Microsoft. I need an unattend.xml to automate the first startup of Windows. I need the Tanium client installer. so that we get the device managed.
And let me pause right there for a second. So like your unattend file, for example, that's all just everyday Windows vanilla documentation. There's nothing Magic Tanium's doing there. We're just using what Microsoft gives us out of the box and delivering that through Tanium. Is that right?
Yeah, we have just authored an XML file, an unattend.xml, that specifies the bare minimum to automate the out-of-box experience for Windows, so that when Windows starts up, you don't need to click next through the wizard. It just does that automatically. So using our unattend, it just gets you to a point where you can log in without any other user interaction.
Nice.
You can customize that if you really needed to, but in most cases, what we provide is sufficient to get you through the process. If you had any custom scripts that you wanted to add into the process, you could do that. Maybe there's some security tools that you want to install right away, and you don't want to wait for Tanium to deploy them for you. You could upload a zip file containing a script and the files to install, and we would take care of downloading and executing that. We can specify drivers that we want to add. In this case, those drivers are separated by model of the machine into different zip files, where the model of the machine is in the name of the zip file. So we automatically download only the zip file that's needed for a particular model of device. So if I were to deploy to an Optiplex 7090, I would know that I only need to download this one zip file for that device. We could optionally apply a patch to the OS, but we don't necessarily need to do that. And then we can do customizations through key values. So I could specify that I want this computer to be named in a particular way. I could specify a template here, like and %and8 to add a 8-character random number to the name. I can specify that it should join a particular domain. I could specify different OU for it to join. I could enable BitLocker. I could set the local admin password on the computer. So a bunch of different simple customizations that we can do. One other thing that I want to put in is a URL for the offline domain join service. So I can put that in here to make sure that we get our device joined to Active Directory. I could even do things like put in custom prompts. So if I'm doing a custom script, maybe I need some additional information for that script. So like I could define a variable called location and could specify that that should have a prompt.
Now this is really getting meta on the whole install process. So you can create your own custom values that then hit your PowerShell script as parameters?
Yes.
Nice.
And that could just be a simple text field, like in this case, input type text, or it could be a drop-down list. So we could specify a drop-down list, and in that list, we could put our different values, maybe Seattle, Denver. So you could just populate this with as many different values as you want. The end user would be able to pick one of those, and we would set a variable with those values that would be passed through the process, and your custom script could do what it wanted with those. Maybe your custom script just does one thing. Maybe it just takes those and applies those as a tag to the machine, so that any Tanium configuration that's been targeted to those tags would be automatically deployed to the computer after that. So lots of options that you can do with this configuration. So we save that. All the content gets uploaded to the Tanium server in parallel. Obviously, the biggest of these files is the WIM file. This is still like a 3 GB file, so that one takes a little bit to upload, but the rest of them go by fairly quickly. After all that content is uploaded, our bundle is ready to be added to a Tanium PXE endpoint. It's not actually ready to deploy yet because we need to specify for this bundle which Tanium PXE endpoints it should end up on.
So talk about that for a second. Obviously, we're uploading a 3 gig file, and if you've got a couple different OS flavors, I'm guessing that PXE endpoint, you need to guarantee you've got some storage available there.
Yes, that would be the biggest requirement. Like all total, this is probably 4.5 gig worth of space. If you had 10 bundles and they were each 4.5 gig in size, you would need 45 gig of disk space. Worst case. Now, we do single instance all of these files. So if the bundles reference the same WIM or the same driver zips or anything like that, we'll only download that file once. But still, you do need a sufficient amount of disk space on that machine.
Very nice. Now, we just went through creating a bundle for a Windows flavor. Is it that different for Linux flavors?
It is exactly the same, but we specify a little different configuration. I need to click a button that's behind my camera, so I had to find it. But we could do a Red Hat 9.1 demo bundle. We could specify that this one is a Linux bundle. Choose Red Hat from the list. Again, it's x64. We use a FSA image file format, which is available on Linux platforms. So we need to find that image file, which I've got here. That image contains a component for Linux called Cloud-init, which is a module that enables the OS to kind of work like Windows. When it boots up, it reads a Cloud-init configuration file that specifies how the OS should be customized. Like what name should it be given, what account should be created, what password should be set for the root account, what custom scripts you want to call. So we use that to call a script that installs the Tanium client, but you could customize that as well to do any additional customization that you might want to do. So we need that Cloud-init template file that we provide, which for Red Hat has an extra step in it that makes sure that you activate a subscription on Red Hat so that you can get updates. So we have the Red Hat file that we want. We need the Tanium client installation files. In this case, I'll just upload the whole bundle of them. I could filter that down to just the Red Hat installer. In this case, it's got installers for all the different Linux distributions that we support, so it's a little bigger than it would need to be otherwise, but that's okay. I can just upload the whole thing. Any additional custom scripts or files that I need, and I could put in key values that I want to do things like set the root password, but I'll just leave those as the default. So we can create that bundle. Again, we upload all the files that we specified, the Tanium client, the Cloud-init configuration file, and the image. Once all of that is uploaded, our bundle is then set to go.
So, Mike, I'm just scratching my head here. Is this really all there is to setting this up? Because this looks really simple. Is there something I need to worry about on the network, like ports and protocols and so forth that need to be allowed from around the endpoints around that PXE server or anything like that?
There certainly can be, depending on your network layout and how your network team has configured things. You may need DHCP helpers in place. Make sure that the PXE requests get forwarded to our Tanium PXE service. You only have one network segment. You don't need that because everything is broadcast on the network segment and just works. If you have existing DHCP forwarders and you put the Tanium PXE service on the same network segment as your existing DHCP server, it may also just work. There are other configuration possibilities as well to help make sure that the clients are able to get the packet to the right place. But assuming our server receives the packet, we'll reply back with the proper response. So worst case, you need to talk to your network guys and get the helpers in place.
Yeah, I've also heard of scenarios where just in a lab, a provisioning lab, right? Whether that's a corporate environment or a managed service provider where they need to crank out dozens or hundreds of machines with fresh images, they can just get them all set up on the desk or the racks there, and you've got your PXE endpoint, and Tanium can do that kind of scenario as well, kind of en masse.
Yeah, if you wanted to only image on one network segment and you put a Tanium PXE service on that network segment, you're set to go because there's no other configuration needed there.
Wow.
Unless you have another PXE endpoint on that same network segment, and then it's a battle of which one will respond back first. But if it's an isolated subnet and we're the only PXE server there, then yeah, we're set to go. So we uploaded those bundles. Let me refresh the list to see if this the The creating status here just means in the background, we're still processing the files. When that's done, then the bundles would actually be deployable. Let's go ahead and do one other step. We need to go back to the provision endpoint and specify that we want those bundles to be available on that endpoint. So we can see right now that there are 27 items. The two that we just created, the Red Hat 9.1 and Windows 11 demo ones, aren't selected. If we want to make those available on this endpoint, we just need to check them and click to save and deploy. And now when the Tanium PXE endpoint gets a new configuration from the Tanium server, it will see that, oh, hey, there's two new bundles that I need to download. Let me download and cache those pieces of content locally. So that will happen over a period of several minutes as the content instructions are first received by the endpoint, and then as it downloads the files containing that particular bundle's content.
Man, I have this moment frequently when we do this show where I'm just thinking about all the years I've spent in IT, and this just is so much easier. Wow. And we've heard that feedback from customers as well, just saying this was so fast to set up and it just works, and it's so it saves us so much time. That's amazing.
Yep, it ends up working out pretty well. Let me see what the status of these bundles is. Now they're both showing green. So they are ready to be deployed. So we have processed them in the background. We've added them to the Tanium PXE endpoint so that they'll get downloaded. Now we should be ready to deploy.
All right. So I want to pause here and ask about, so we're looking here at OS deployment, but I know we also do refreshes. Could you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, if you've got a machine that's currently running Windows, and you want to deploy one of these OS bundles out to that, we can leverage the Tanium client to do that. So we'll create a package that gets sent out to the client that runs a PowerShell script that initiates the same bare metal process, just does it using the Tanium client and the Tanium infrastructure to get all that content downloaded. We can initiate that through the console. So we would go to OS refresh deployments, where we could create a new deployment and specify what we want to deploy. So we can choose a bundle like Windows 11 demo and where we want to deploy it. So we could specify either a question, like select all machines running Windows 10. I'm going to refresh them to Windows 11. Or we could just specify a list of computer names. Like if I've got an existing text file with the name of all my machines in a lab, and I want to re-image all of those machines to start fresh for the next set of students coming into that lab, I could just specify a list of computer names, either in a CSV file, or I could copy and paste them into the environment here. So,
oh my goodness, man, I'm having flashbacks of 20 years ago when I used to teach like Windows NT and Office 97. I'm dating myself. I mean, it was such a hassle to rebuild the training environment every time after a class, this has got so many applications.
Yeah. And we have the ability to use the linear chain for Tanium to download all that content. So even if you say, I want to reimage 200 devices, we're only going to transfer all of that data once across the whole set of Tanium devices to get it out to the endpoint. So it's very scalable from that perspective. If you want to do 200 devices in an afternoon, no problem. We can take care of that. That's the basic process. We give it a name, like refresh. We specify what bundle we want to deploy, and then we specify the computers that we want to use. We did have a customer request for a unique scenario too. They said, well, we've got some existing Windows computers and we'd like to refresh them to Linux. Can you do that? Like, I think we can do that. So you can actually choose RedHat. So you could say, I want these existing Windows devices to be refreshed to Linux, and we'll take care of doing the necessary steps to remove Windows from the device, lay down the Linux image, and boot into that Linux image to get the device up and running again. Now we
All right,
do
so
have,
here's this. This blows my mind because you said earlier we could even use a Mac endpoint for a PXE server. So I could PXE from a Mac, hit a Windows box, and reimage it to Linux. That is just crazy.
yep. We don't actually support the opposite. So going from Linux to Windows, we haven't implemented that, not because we can't, but just because no one's asked for it. So if someone can come up with a good reason why they would want to go from Linux to Windows, it's not that hard to add. It just hasn't been a priority to do that yet, but certainly doable. We know the different pieces of technology required to make that work. We could make that work if necessary.
Well, I know we're running long on time here, and I appreciate everybody sticking with us through this video because if you're still watching at this point, I know you really need this. So, folks, what we're going to do right now is because in IT, a lot of us we get paid to watch progress bars, and some of us enjoy that, some of us maybe not. So, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of edit the show right here. So I've got a second video where you can go just look at the playlist where you found this video, look for part 2 of the provision episode. And there you're going to get to watch Mike walk us through a Windows provision, a Red Hat provision, a Windows to Red Hat provision, and then what we call the wall of fire, where he does 30 machines at once. So I know some of you are really going to enjoy that. Some of you and maybe would rather go eat lunch. So go check out the part 2 video and you'll get to see Michael walk through each one of those. So Mike, thank you for these amazing demos today. And I know I use the word amazing a lot on this show. It's just, it really is. It blows me away of what you've built, you and the team. So I'm thinking as an everyday Tanium admin, I see this and I say, oh, wow, I could really use this. What do people need to know as far as getting this into their environment?
The main thing would be just the requirements for running Tanium provision. It's considered an add-on to Tanium deploy. So you can get it if you as an add-on if you're an existing Tanium deploy customer. It's also part of the Tanium deploy suite of bundles of modules. So there are multiple options for doing that, but certainly talk to your Tanium account team or technical account manager for more details on the requirements for getting it up and running, or to set up a POC to try it out.
Well, what you've shown me today looks really well done. Are there things that you're thinking ahead, like what might come next?
We're constantly listening to customer feedback and making additional tweaks to the process to add in their feedback. So we already have the next 2 releases underway. So it's constantly evolving to really add additional little things here and there. So no huge changes that we're looking at this point, but certainly the little things add up as we listen to all of the customer feedback that we've been getting and make the tweaks needed for addressing their concerns or their what they're really looking for to make the process just a little better or a little more applicable to their environment.
Well, Mike, as we wrap up here, are there any last thoughts you want to share with our audience before we close?
Nothing that really comes to mind. Obviously, if you have feedback on the solution, let us know. You can find me on Twitter as well, so you can provide any feedback you want there. You can probably figure out my Tanium email address, since it's firstname.lastname@tanium.com. So email me with any questions or comments that you have, and I'll be trying to get back to you. Certainly looking forward to any feedback that anyone has.
Yeah, and you can also send that through your account team as well, whoever you normally work with at Tanium. So, Mike, thank you so much for giving us this thorough tour of the Tanium provision module. Wow, just a little clap there for you and the team. What you've built is amazing. Also, in the show notes below, there's a link to the KB release notes where you can find specific features listed, what versions and so forth. Also, the documentation at docs.tanium.com got a whole set there for this module that you can read through as you're waiting to get everything licensed up in your instance. You can start reading those docs so you're ready to go. And we also have, of course, Tanium and our partners who can help you get this deployed in your environment should you need any assistance. So thanks for watching Tanium Tech Talks today. And until next time, Go-Tanium. You said earlier we could even use a Mac endpoint for a PXE server. So I could PXE from a Mac, hit a Windows box, and reimage it to Linux. That is just crazy.